I'm 79 years old, and I want to tell you something that took me most of my life to understand. The Psalms are not comfort poetry. They are a technology for surviving the unsurvivable, and almost nobody is using them correctly. We come to the Psalms looking for the feeling of peace. We open to a familiar verse, we find something that sounds soothing, and we wait for the warmth to arrive. And sometimes it does, briefly. But then the hard thing is still there in the morning, and the verse on the page feels thin against it. So we decide we didn't pray hard enough, or believe enough, or that we chose the wrong words. But the problem was never our faith. The problem was that we misunderstood what the Psalms actually are and what they were built to do. The Psalms are not resolutions. They are not conclusions someone wrote after the suffering was over and the answers had arrived. They are documents written inside the suffering, from the middle of it, with no guarantee of how things would turn out. That changes everything about how you read them. When you understand that, the Psalms stop being a collection of beautiful statements and start being something far more powerful. A record of human beings who refused to stop speaking in the dark, who kept addressing something they couldn't see, who made language out of their despair and handed it forward to every generation that came after. And here's what most people miss. The Psalms that actually bring peace are not the ones that skip to the good part. The ones that carry real peace in them are the ones that tell the whole truth first, without flinching, without softening it, without rushing to the resolution before the grief has been honored. Psalm 22 is the clearest example of this. It begins with words that Jesus himself cried from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That is not an opening line of comfort. That is complete desolation put into language, and the psalm doesn't retreat from that immediately. It stays there. It describes enemies circling, strength dried up like a potsherd, bones out of joint. It describes a person at the absolute limit of what a human being can endure. And then, gradually, something shifts. Not because the circumstances changed, but because the speaking itself, the full, honest speaking of the truth, opens something. The psalm moves through the darkness rather than around it. And the peace that comes at the end of Psalm 22 is not the peace of someone who was spared. It is the peace of someone who went all the way through. This is the architecture that matters. Descent, then ascent, full lament, then hard-won trust. The psalms that bring lasting peace follow this shape because that is the shape of real human experience. There are no shortcuts in the psalms. Every psalm that ends in genuine rest earned that rest by first being honest about the weight of the burden. But it goes even deeper than that. The psalms are not just literature about peace. They are a practice that creates the conditions for peace to arrive. When you speak a psalm aloud, and they were always meant to be spoken, they were psalms before they were scripture. Something happens in the body that reading silently cannot produce. The breath changes, the words move through you physically, and when the words are words that name what is actually true about your suffering, something releases. You are no longer holding the pain alone inside your chest. You have given it form, given it language, given it somewhere to go. The Psalms function as a kind of sacred pressure valve, not to make the pain disappear, but to make it speakable. And speakable pain is pain that can be moved through. Psalm 46 is one people quote often, but rarely read carefully enough. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea. People read this as a psalm about fearlessness. But look at what is being described. The earth gives way. The mountains fall. The seas roar and foam. This is not a psalm written for calm weather. This is a psalm written for catastrophe. The writer is not saying life will not fall apart. The writer is saying, even when it does, even when everything collapses, there is something that does not. And the peace of this psalm is not the peace of a life without crisis. It is the peace of something underneath the crisis that does not move. This is the distinction that changes everything. The peace the Psalms offer is not the peace of a calm life. It is the peace of an unshakable ground beneath a shaking life. Most people spend their entire lives searching for circumstances that will finally make them feel at peace. And the Psalms are trying to tell us that peace is not located in circumstances. It is located in something else entirely. Something that the circumstances cannot touch because it exists at a different level than the circumstances do. Psalm 23 is probably the most recited psalm in the world, and because of that, most people have stopped actually hearing it. They know the words the way you know the route to your own house, and so automatically that you stop seeing anything along the way. But slow it down. The shepherd leads through the valley of the shadow of death, not around it, not after it, through it, while it is still dark, while the shadow is still falling. And the great line of the psalm, Thou art with me. This declaration of presence comes in the middle of the valley, not at the end of it, not after the shadow has passed, in the middle of it. The peace of Psalm 23 is not the peace that arrives when the hard thing is behind you. It is the peace that exists inside the hard thing, alongside it, carried in it. That is a completely different promise than what most people believe they are being given. And here's the deeper truth underneath that. The Psalms are collectively making one claim over and over in 100 different voices and situations. That presence is possible everywhere. That there is no place so dark, no situation so broken, no interior state so desolate that it falls outside the reach of what these Psalms are pointing toward. Psalm 139 makes this most explicit. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? And then the Psalm systematically dismantles every escape route. The heights of heaven, the depths of the sea, the darkness, the uttermost parts of the world, each one answered the same way. I'll come down there too, even there. Even in the place I most desperately want to flee, I cannot leave this presence behind. For most of my life, I read that as comfort. But at 79, I understand it as something more radical than comfort. It is a complete restructuring of reality. There is no abandoned place. There is no unreachable corner of existence. Every location, including the locations inside the human heart that we are most ashamed of and most afraid of, falls within the territory this presence inhabits. The Psalms are saying, you cannot get far enough gone. The Psalms of Lament deserve particular attention because they are the most misunderstood and the most underused. There are more lament psalms than any other kind in the collection. More than praise psalms, more than thanksgiving psalms, more than psalms of instruction or wisdom. The largest single category in the psalms is the cry of pain addressed to God. And this is not an accident. It is a theological statement about what honesty before the divine actually looks like. The tradition that preserved these texts decided that raw human anguish, unresolved and unanswered, was sacred enough to be kept. That a prayer which ends without resolution is still a prayer. That the willingness to bring your real interior life into the presence of God without dressing it up, without making it more palatable, without performing a peace you don't actually feel, this is not a failure of faith. This is faith of the most demanding kind. Psalm 88 is the darkest proof of this. It is the one psalm in the entire collection that offers no resolution, no turn toward hope, no uplift at the end. It begins in darkness and it ends in darkness. The final word in Hebrew is darkness. And this psalm was kept. It was considered holy. It was given to every generation that came after as a legitimate form of prayer. Because sometimes life does not give you the resolution. Sometimes the prayer goes unanswered in the way you needed it answered. And in those moments, Psalm 88 is saying to you, even this is a valid thing to bring. Even the prayer that finds no comfort, the cry that receives no clear answer, even that deserves to be spoken. Even that is not outside the territory of what can be addressed. The real power of understanding this is what it does to your interior life. When you know that the Psalms hold space for the full truth of where you are, not where you wish you were, not where you think you should be spiritually, not the version of yourself that has already worked through the hard thing, but where you actually, honestly, at this moment are, then you can bring yourself to the Psalms without editing yourself first. And that changes the encounter completely. Most people edit themselves before they pray. They make themselves more composed than they are, more accepting than they are, more trusting than they are. And then they wonder why the prayer doesn't touch anything real in them. The Psalms are the antidote to that. They hand you language for the unedited self. They give you permission to arrive exactly as you are. Devastated, furious, confused, utterly without clarity about what you believe or what you feel or what you want. Bring that. Bring all of that. The Psalms were written by people who brought all of that. They became sacred because of it, not in spite of it. Here is the practical way to use them. Find the psalm that names where you actually are right now, not where you hope to be. If you are in genuine sorrow, don't reach for a psalm of praise. Go to Psalm 22 or Psalm 88 or Psalm 102. Let the words that name real darkness be the words you speak. Read it aloud, even if you are alone, even if you feel awkward, even if your voice is unsteady. Let the speaking happen in the body. Read it slowly enough that you can feel each line. And don't rush to get to the resolution. Stay in the lament long enough for it to do its work, long enough for the truth of your situation to be fully honored by the language of the text. Do this over days. Come back to the same psalm. Let it become familiar in the way that changes you rather than the way that stops surprising you. The peace that the Psalms carry is not delivered in a single reading. It accumulates. It builds the way a foundation is built, course by course, layer by layer, each one supporting what comes after. And one day you will notice that something has shifted, not that the hard thing has gone away, but that you are carrying it differently, that there is something underneath you that was not there before, something that does not shake even when everything else does. The Psalms have been spoken by people in every kind of suffering that human beings have ever known, across 3,000 years, in every language the world has ever held, in every extremity of human experience. These words have been the ones people reached for, not because they make the suffering stop, but because they make the suffering speakable. And speakable suffering, suffering that is brought into language and brought into presence, is suffering that can be survived. That is what the Psalms actually are. Not comfort for those who no longer need comforting, but company for those who are still in the middle of needing it. And at 79, I could tell you, the company is the only peace that is ever held.